I will be discussing about challenges in the treatment of gestational trophoblastic disease. I think maybe it is not a very common disease for the oncologists, but in the benign setting for the gynecologists working in the general medical colleges, I think it's quite a common situation. And most of these are personal cases. So all these will be case-based discussions because each case is different than the other. Yeah. So I think God's first cancer and man's first cure. So it was Hutchings who told this in 1968, but the irony still today is that some patients do die of the disease. So there are many challenging situations which may be due to the disease or maybe due to the treatment. However, the overall definitive care for GTN is the purview of the gynecologist. However, many times these patients would land up in the ICU, and many of the potentially lethal complications the ICU physician should be aware about this. But however, it's the main purview is with the gynecologist. So I think it's a very deceptive disease like the venous flytrap. So the main challenge has to be met by having suspicion of cases which really do not fit into anything in the reproductive age group. So that's the first challenge that we have to look at that. So the challenge may start really from molar evacuation itself. When you could have a huge cervical tear, you could have some torrential hemorrhage, perforation, chemoembolization, anything could happen, and all these complications and more if the uterus size is more than 12 to 14 weeks. So to prevent all this, a proper cervical ripening, judicious use of oxytocin, proper cannula placement in the center of the uterus, IV line, hands on the fundus, and if you are very luxurious to have ultrasound guidance, that's the best thing. And a sharp curettage can be done at the end of the procedure, but then again it has to be very gentle, and baseline oxygen saturation has to be done. So perforation is a very common complication that arises of molar pregnancies, and it could be spontaneous or during molar evacuation, or may arise sometimes during surgical management also. So I think we have to be very careful about these complications. So challenges or emergencies that could arise at surgery, embolization, so we need to minimal manipulation, and some people do advise prophylactic chemotherapy also before that. These patients are usually anemic. There is extensive vascular supply, and sometimes unrecognized extrauterine disease may be there, and they are hemodynamically unstable, and they are also very prone for DIC. So whenever we are operating such kind of cases, I think an experienced surgical team should be there, and ICU backup if there is really a good option. So this case was admitted in ICU in shock with massive hemoperitoneum, but fortunately she gave a history of molar evacuation 2 months back, and the beta HCG was 549. Many times we don't ask for such a history. So the clinical findings, she was pale, there was intraperitoneal fluid of around 1.5 liters, and blood transfusion was given, and she was planned for an emergency laparotomy. So hemoperitoneum was around 2 liters, bilateral ovaries was normal, POD was normal. So here you can see that there was a perforation near the fundus of the uterus, and on a manipulation it bled torrentially, and here you can see that the cavity is normal. So what was our problem? That we had not counseled, whoever had done the molar evacuation had not counseled the patient about this complication that could always happen. So counseling for follow-up after treatment is very important. Segmental resection of this could have been done, so history taking is also very important. So this is a second case who was 25 years. She had a history of abortion 18 months back, had a hard mass of 20 weeks, nodules on the right lateral vaginal wall, hard tender mass felt in the right labial region, and a huge mass felt, and the uterus could not be separately palpated, and the beta HCG was more than 2 lakhs. So these are the findings of a CT on the liver metastasis and lung metastasis. So the score was 19. So Imaco was started, and patient had a stroke and severe bleeding, and expired at 2 weeks of admission. So the challenge of managing very high risk disease is really tremendous. So anywhere when the score is more than 13, and with a history of choriocarcinoma, pulmonary metastasis more than 20, brain mets, large volume liver metastasis, or profuse vaginal bleeding, HCG more than 1 lakh, or last pregnancy event more than 2.8 years, these are very high risk factors in ultra high risk GTN. So there is early death in these cases due to intracranial hemorrhage, intratumoral bleed, fatal hemorrhage into the lungs, multi-organ failure, tumor lysis syndrome, and life-threatening myelosuppression. So we have to prevent this by mild induction chemotherapy, ICU backup, and extreme care when giving chemotherapy, and stem cell support, GCSF. We should not think that these people are too high risk and will surely die, because they are very young patients, and a special care will really give them a good life after that. And some studies have shown immunotherapy also has good result in these cases. Adequate hydration and allopurinol also have a role. So unstable patients and extensive metastatic disease, so methotrexate infusion with leucovorin rescue or etoposide 100 milligram with cisplatin, these can be used to avoid catastrophic hemorrhage from high burden metastasis. Then EMACO is initiated as soon as possible when the patient is stable. So patients with high risk disease and large tumor burden will require ventilatory and intensive care support. Ideal support be given during the initial phase of treatment, even if widely metastatic disease, and because they have a relatively good survival. So this is a study which has shown that to avoid early deaths in ultra high risk GTN with or without a higher number of metastases more than 6 and higher HCG more than 10 lakhs seem to benefit from the use of induction low dose etoposide and cisplatin. So this is the third case who presented with severe vomiting for 1 month with a history of MTP 1 month back, and the cervix looked violaceous, balloon, and the uterus was 8 to 10 weeks. So a tissue from the endocervix was taken, and histopathology was trophoblastic disease, and beta HCG was 15 international units per ml. So the diagnosis was really in a dilemma, and it was thought to be could be a molar event. So, and ultrasound showed multiple myomas. So because she was a multipara, the extra chest was also normal. So OTH with RSO was done. And but the post-operative period was very, very stormy. With on the 5th post-operative day, she developed vaginal nodules. And again, the beta HCG was repeated, and again it showed a very low value of 123. So with but the histopathology report was choriocarcinoma, cervical tissue also showed choriocarcinoma. So how could the beta HCG be so low? So there could be so many reasons in which we can have a low beta HCG. So we should keep our eyes open and ears open, because there are many conditions in which the beta HCG can be low even in a very high risk cases, and PSTT and a hook effect are one of these. So in this, we have to do it in dilution to confirm that it is a high risk GTD and not the false negative which we are seeing. So again, coming to this challenging situation in low risk GTN where the FIGO score is 5 and 6, in the recent article in Lancet Oncology in 21 has shown that when the score is 5 or 6, who have high chance of chemoresistance to single agent chemotherapy, is possible by, we have to diagnose these cases, and this is possible by all the tests that we have. So the prognostic factors of pre-treatment HCG concentration, metastatic disease, choriocarcinoma histology are readily ascertained by simple diagnostic tests. Most patients with a FIGO risk score of 5 or 6 can start chemotherapy with single agent, but we have to remember that 60% will respond and the rest 40% will not. So first line multi-agent chemotherapy has to be judiciously used in those with no metastatic disease and no choriocarcinoma who have a pre-treatment human chorionic gonadotropin concentration no more than 4 lakhs. Those with metastatic disease or histopathological evidence of choriocarcinoma and a pre-treatment beta HCG of more than 1.5 lakhs, and those with metastatic disease and choriocarcinoma. So in these cases, you can start multi-agent directly. So this is the fourth case, 20 years, presents to casualty with severe pain abdomen, amenorrhea 12 weeks, molar pregnancy with thecal uterine cyst. So torsion can happen in these cases also. So laparotomy and detorsion is the treatment, and we are not supposed to remove these ovaries because they will come back to the normal size as soon as the beta HCG normalizes. So thecal uterine cyst, in rare cases, there is adnexal torsion with acute abdomen or rupture that results in hemiperitoneum. Both of these call for immediate treatment. So case 5 is a 27 years paravan, bleeding PV, nausea, extremity tremors, tachycardia, hypertension. Ultrasound showed mole with large thecal uterine cyst, beta HCG more than 1 lakh. Evacuation done, treated with propranolol and improved in weeks time. So this can also happen. And hyperthyroidism and human chorionic gonadotropin production in gestational trophoblastic disease. High levels of HCG are typically required for development of clinical hyperthyroidism. Sometimes when you subject these patients to CT scan and use contrast iodinated substances, they may trigger a crisis, which is called a George-Besdo phenomenon. So we have to keep this in mind. So 38 years, again, severe vaginal bleeding, episodic, history of molar evacuation 1 month back, ultrasound showed cavity is empty, lesion was in the myometrium with increased vascularity and with multidirectional flow, and beta HCG was 8,534. So she was treated with methotrexate and folinic acid, and for the bleeding, DMPA injection was utilized and she was cured. So arteriovenous malformation is more if the number of curetage is more, pre-evacuation beta HCG is high, uterine artery RI less than 0.32. So and uterine artery peak systolic velocity more than 78. So these are managed by regress. Most of the time they would regress spontaneously, uterine artery embolization, DMPA, COC, but then we'll restrict, keep hysterectomy to the last as a last resort. So uterine AV malformation following gestational trophoblastic neoplasia, a systematic review has shown that we can control the hemorrhage from GTN, and these patients had good response by uterine artery embolization. So because this is a curable condition and preservation of reproductive and endocrine function is a major concern. So this is again a 20-year-old para 0 presented with profuse vaginal bleeding, history of molar evacuation 2 months back. Methotrexate folinic acid was given. Ultrasound showed vascular lesion in the myometrium and cavity. So beta HCG was 8,000. Emergency packing uterus of the uterus and vagina. Deep stitches at the suburethral metastasis region. Biopsy should not be done, is dangerous and unnecessary. That should be kept in mind. So very rarely uterine artery ligation may be required. And again, hysterectomy is the last resort. So selective uterine artery embolization is an option. And tubal molar pregnancy, this may present with acute hemoperitoneum. Histopathology study is important to differentiate from tubal pregnancy. And lung metastasis may present with hemoptysis, dyspnea, risk of cerebral metastasis, and CT scan is of course more diagnostic, but then we have to manage these cases very carefully in the ICU. Hepatic metastasis, again, tumor embolization, hepatic radiation may be required. But if it is a single metastasis, surgical resection may be done, and chemotherapy using etoposide-based regimens are superior to MAC. Brain metastasis, these are chemosensitive, cautious LP should be done, and HCG CSF to serum ratio should be more than 1:60. Craniotomy may sometimes be necessary with resection of the isolated metastasis to release the intracranial pressure, raising a skull flap to relieve immediate pressure, and targeted radiosurgery, and radiation, whole brain radiation is now no more routinely recommended. So this was a very interesting case in which a woman came to us with 17 units of blood transfusion and profuse hemoptysis, and on endoscopy and biopsy from the stomach showed choriocarcinoma. So they can also present with lesions in the GI system. So these just to remind our younger colleagues of all the typical presentation that can happen with the GTD, atypical gynecologic manifestation like vulvovaginal mass, uterine serosal metastasis, spontaneous uterine perforation, cervical growth, fetomaternal hemorrhage, transmission to the fetus, and development in cesarean scar. Cutaneous and ocular metastasis can happen. They could mimic herpes, erythematous nodules, metastasis to fingers, subcutaneous nodules, acute red painful eye, decreased visual acuity, choroid metastasis, and so on. They could have renal and endocrinological manifestations like renal subcapsular hematoma, spontaneous renal hemorrhage, membranous glomerulonephritis, and on and on. They could have cardiopulmonary manifestations, as we have all seen, and cardiac intracavitary masses have also been removed in GTD. Gastrointestinal manifestations we have seen. There could be also refractory anemia, polypoidal masses in the duodenum or jejunum, and CNS system, stroke-like lesion, intracerebral hemorrhage, focal neurologic deficit, and so on and on. So anything on under the sky can manifest, be a manifestations of GTD. So the take-home message is that presentation is very, very deceptive, and that's the biggest challenge. So high degree of suspicion is the key. More and more patients being detected with GTN now, and some women still die before starting the treatment. And careful evaluation of the disease is important. Counseling is very, very important, and low dose induction chemotherapy in ultra high risk cases will go a long way to save these patients. But just to remind all of you that history still holds good. It was Brewer who told that the first to report that both the morbidity and mortality of patients with GTN was 9 times lower at a center staffed by physicians experienced in the management of this neoplasia than with the occasional physician treating this entity. So I think still today it holds good, and we need to send the patient to centers which are treating this patients regularly. And that means we need to develop centers, trophoblastic centers, and pulling of data and pulling of patients, so that we increase our expertise. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.